Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And boy oh boy, if you're a Nintendo fan, let me tell you, there's some exciting things happening behind the scenes right now. It does appear a couple dormant franchises are set to return, one in the form of a remaster, and then for the other as a next generation game. And this one in particular is something that could possibly take the game industry by storm. Now, also, Xbox Phil Spencer is making the rounds once again, and he had something quite interesting to say that points to a new direction that they might be taking in 2024, a way for them to expand their Xbox business to a whole new group of players. As always, though, we do have plenty of other things to talk about as well. Do hit those buttons below if you're enjoying the content. But without further ado, let's just go and jump right into it, starting off with Sea of Stars. I'd say that right now, this is one of the more exciting JRPGs set for 2023, and I mean, you can easily see why. It goes without much explanation at all. This is a beautiful game with a mesmerizing art style. It's inspired by one of the all-time greats, Chrono Trigger, and it's also coming from the creators of The Messenger, which in its own right is an excellent game. So, I mean, without a doubt, there's high hopes for Sea of Stars. Well, the good news here is that this game is now completely multi-platform, with them just now announcing that it is also slated to come over to Xbox alongside the already announced PlayStation, Nintendo, and of course, PC versions on August 29th. So there you go. Everybody can now look forward to this promising title later this year. I mean, who knows if it'll beat those expectations, but hey, if it does, Sea of Stars could be a special release when it drops again on August 29th. In the meantime, though, there is a demo available on the Nintendo eShop, so if you do want to check this game out a little early, do go ahead and keep that in mind. Now, we also have Resident Evil 4 Remake releasing later this week on March 24th. I know a lot of us are very much excited for this game, but despite it being critically acclaimed with a 93 overall score on Metacritic, there does appear to be some noticeable problems with this game as it currently stands. Now, there's two specific key issues happening here. The first and maybe bigger problem here is that its dead zones appear to be poorly optimized as of this moment. Now, what that means is that when you move your analog sticks, your character won't move or aim until you hit a specific threshold. A lot of games do this to counteract stick drift, so I mean, this isn't really an uncommon thing or anything like that, but unfortunately when it comes to Resident Evil 4, it seems like they might have gone a little overboard. This might just be a bug, but this was discovered in the Chainsaw demo where some players noticed that something doesn't feel quite right, and that's because the dead zones have too high of a threshold. More so is that each platform is being affected differently. So the Xbox version is actually being impacted the most, then the PC version, and lastly you have the PlayStation 5, which means the movement is actually the best on the PlayStation 5. Even still though, all versions of the game are not satisfactory as of this time when it comes to dead zones. Hopefully this will be fixed by the time of its full release, or even better, I mean, just allow players to customize their dead zones like most games do. I'm not exactly sure why they don't have that included as is, but it is something to kind of keep in mind as we head into its official launch later this week. If anything, maybe go and check out the demo beforehand and see if you're okay with the dead zones as is, and if you have multiple platforms, you might want to go ahead and compare each version to see if you notice a difference. The other problem here, though, is linked to the PlayStation 5. This is coming from John Linneman over on Digital Foundry, and he did confirm that the PlayStation 5 version still unfortunately has poor image quality. Some have noticed that its image quality is a little blurry on the PlayStation 5, and John Linneman says that still remains the case, but luckily they have at least fixed ray tracing, so I guess there is that. Nonetheless, I mean, I'm still very, very excited for this game, but hopefully Capcom comes in and fixes up some of this stuff sooner rather than later. Oh, and speaking of the PlayStation 5, we are getting closer to the release of Final Fantasy 16. And I mean, from everything that we've heard and seen of this game, it just keeps looking better and better. I mean, really, I've been sold on this game for quite some time. Probably one of my most anticipated games this year, honestly. But they did just give us another update, this time for its playtime. They're now claiming that it'll take roughly 35 hours to complete its main story, though if you want to see everything the game has to offer, then you're looking at around 75 to 80 hours of gameplay. I'd say that that's more than a good runtime here, and in fact, this actually puts it more in line with classic Final Fantasy titles. The original Final Fantasy VII, as an example, is about 36 hours long, whereas Final Fantasy 15, that's about 28. And the thing about Final Fantasy 15, because I know not everybody particularly loved that entry, and the issue that some players had with it especially when it came to the vanilla version, is that it didn't fully flesh out its story and characters. It could have used a little bit more playtime to further expand on its story. So I think it's good to see Final Fantasy XVI be more in line with those classic entries in terms of playtime, and hopefully that'll be a good indication of what to expect when it releases later this year on June 22nd. Let's go and talk about Nintendo, though, because they have a few exciting games apparently brewing in the background. One big story really this entire year has been about what is happening with Nintendo after Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Is this really the last hurrah? Is this the last big game for the Nintendo Switch? Well, I think the first thing about that line of thinking is that it's very debatable on what you actually consider a big release. Not everybody's going to be on the same page here. I mean, if you think about it, Nintendo just dropped Metroid Prime Remastered. And for a lot of people, they'd consider that a big release, despite it not necessarily being as big of a seller as something like Mario, Zelda, or Pokemon. So that's kind of the first thing everybody needs to keep in mind here. Even if there's not necessarily a huge system seller on the same level as something like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, that doesn't necessarily mean Nintendo doesn't have other exciting games coming for the Switch. And well, actually about that, one of the two games that just leaked is yet another GameCube remaster / remake that a lot of fans have been clamoring about pretty much since 2003, and that's F-Zero GX. This franchise has pretty much just up and vanished since that game released back on the GameCube in 2003. And while fans continue to hope for a sequel in some form, to no avail, unfortunately, still no news on that front. But at the very least, according to a new leak by Nintendo Prime, this is a fellow YouTuber, do go check his channel out. But according to him, F-Zero GX is indeed making a comeback for the Nintendo Switch. Now, the thing here is that this is not the first time we've heard about this remaster / remake or whatever it is. Much like the Metroid Prime rumors that was ongoing for several years, this has been in the rumor mill for quite some time. Though in this instance, Nintendo Prime added a little bit more, we'll call it pizzazz, as he revealed the studio that's supposedly working on this game, and that's none other than Next Level Games. Yeah, that part came as a little bit of a surprise. Next Level Games is the studio behind Luigi's Mansion 3, so I figured they'd just kind of be busy with Luigi's Mansion 4, but instead it actually looks like this could possibly be their second project in development. And you know what? I actually really like this news, and let me explain why. That's simply because Luigi's Mansion 3 to this day is one of the absolute best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. It's a great looking game, and the thing about F-Zero GX is that it's an impressive game in its own right. Even 20 years after its original release, I mean, it's crazy to think about that, but yes, 20 years after its original release on the GameCube, it still looks good to this day. It does run at 60 frames per second, and it also has the visuals to go along with that. So I like the idea of Next Level Games, a studio that's proven their technical prowess on the Switch, to get the chance to really take F-Zero GX to the next level. Of course, though, I mean, do keep in mind that this is only a rumor for the time being, and with any rumors, take it with a grain of salt until officially confirmed. But for all of you F-Zero fans out there, I certainly hope this one comes to fruition. Now, as for this other game here, and I think this one's actually even more exciting, because Nintendo Prime also claims that a new Donkey Kong game is in development and could launch alongside Nintendo's next console. Now, this is another one of those rumors that's been much talked about in the past. We have heard about this already, but according to him, those rumors were absolutely true and that it's still in development. He actually goes so far to say that he's seen footage of it and everything, and this is where things start to get really exciting. See, the thing is that previous rumors of this game claimed that it was being developed by some of the Super Mario Odyssey team, which that still does appear to be the case here, though there were some mixed messages on whether or not it would be a 2D or 3D game. Well, according to Nintendo Prime, he claims that this new Donkey Kong game is an open-world style of game similar to Zelda Breath of the Wild, but with Donkey Kong instead swinging around a jungle setting. Now, I've said this multiple times in the past, but I think this is exactly what they need to do with the Donkey Kong franchise. I mean, we just saw what happened with Kirby and its transition to 3D. Fans took to that change very, very well, and now it's actually gone on to be the fastest selling Kirby game ever. Well, I think you could do even more with the Donkey Kong IP. I mean, yes, we had that 3D Donkey Kong back on the Nintendo 64, but we haven't really seen a 3D Donkey Kong entry since Donkey Kong 64, and I mean, I think that's just such a shame because his playstyle and attributes perfectly fits with a 3D environment. There's a lot that you could do in a 3D Donkey Kong game, especially if you want to involve different characters. So, I mean, honestly, I think all things considered, I think this could turn out to be an amazing game that could just blow up, especially if it launches alongside that next Nintendo console, as is claimed here. I mean, we've kind of talked about that Switch effect in the past where all of these franchises, they're just selling so much more on the Switch, and one part of that is their transition to a different playstyle, and I think that we could see a similar effect here with the Donkey Kong IP. I think this could be a huge thing for the Donkey Kong franchise, especially if it launches alongside that next Nintendo platform, similar to what we saw with Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to sell like 25+ million units or whatever that game sold, but I think that we could see a huge rise in popularity for the Donkey Kong franchise. Even more so, he does also claim that Shigeru Miyamoto has a heavy involvement with this game as well. Now, again, do keep in mind that this is all just a rumor for the time being, but hey, if this does turn out to be true, well, the launch of the next Nintendo console could be another wow year for them. I mean, maybe Metroid Prime 4 and a new open-world Donkey Kong game to start off Nintendo's next console. Yeah, they already have me on board for that next console if that turns out to be the case. Now, we do also have some Xbox news today, as Phil Spencer talked about their desire to get into the mobile market, and that it's a big part of the Activision Blizzard King acquisition. I mean, they've already talked about this various times already, so this doesn't really come as a major surprise or anything like that. But he did dive into the topic a little bit more by talking with the Financial Times, and not only did he mention their desire to enter the mobile market, but he actually pointed to next year as to when they could launch their own mobile storefront. Now, the reason for this specific time frame is because that's when it's expected that Google and Apple will have to open up their mobile platforms for third-party stores due to the EU's Digital Market Act. More or less, Google and Apple have been under major scrutiny for what's considered a duopoly in the mobile market, and this Digital Market Act looks to fix that specific issue. Now, this has not gone into full effect as of yet, but it is expected to happen by March of next year, and that's where Microsoft and ABK comes in. Phil Spencer went on to tell the Financial Times, "We want to be in a position to offer Xbox and content from both us and our third-party partners across any screen where somebody would want to play. Today, we can't do that on mobile devices, but we want to build towards a world that we think will be coming where those devices are open up. The Digital Markets Act that's coming, those are the kinds of things that we are planning for. I think it's a huge opportunity." Now, one of the reasons that he brought this up is because he believes it's another reason that regulators should approve the buyout of Activision Blizzard. On one side, regulators are having these massive issues with Google and Apple, and they understand that they need more competition in the mobile market. But then, they're also battling against Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. And Microsoft's like, hey, we need this acquisition so we can compete against Google and Apple, which you all are currently having problems with. We thought you all would like that. But here we are instead, and you all are trying to make this about Sony and Call of Duty, which we've already said it will remain multi-platform. So, yeah, there's two different things happening here, but Phil Spencer did note that if they are to release their own mobile store next year, they don't want it to just be a cloud-based service only. While that's nice and everything, they want that mobile-first content like Candy Crush, Diablo Eternal, and Call of Duty Mobile, which will act as a bridge to get consumers into their store. Content is king. As we all know, you can't just build a store and expect people to come. You have to have the content, and ABK certainly has that ability with huge mobile franchises already. On the opposite side of the coin, Microsoft is essentially non-existent when it comes to the mobile market without Activision Blizzard King. So that is one of the reasons that they do want ABK, and it's also one of the reasons that they are telling regulators, hey, this is why you all should approve the buyout. Nonetheless, though, if the acquisition does go through, do expect a Microsoft mobile storefront sometime next year in 2024. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all with rumors of a Castlevania returning. Which playstyle do you prefer? And interestingly enough, the majority of you all do actually prefer 2D, with 53% of you all voting for that, and then 38% of you all voted for 3D. Now, I guess one thing that you can kind of see here is that there's definitely a lot of fans for both styles of gameplay, but I do find it interesting that more people voted for 2D rather than that big AAA 3D type of environment. And I'm actually with you all when it comes to this. I feel like when it comes to the Castlevania games, I've definitely enjoyed the 2D iterations more. Now, that's not to say that a 3D version won't come out and just blow me away. I mean, who knows? It definitely has the capability to do that, but I think the 2D Castlevania games have really been something special in the past. I mean, the fact that you have a genre named after you, Metroidvania, that's kind of telling on its own. I mean, just look at Castlevania Symphony of Night. That is, to this day, viewed as one of the all-time greats within the genre. And for good reason. There's also the Castlevania Advance games. Those games were absolutely fantastic. I just feel like they have been more consistently good when it comes to the 2D iterations. So that's where, yeah, I'd probably go ahead and vote for the 2D entries as well. For that matter, I mean, I'm just a big Metroidvania fan, so probably not too shocking there. But yeah, I'm with you on this one. Anyways, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.